Welcome back and thank you for joining us. This is Beyond Wild is One. We are glad you're watching. I'm Eric Kunzoka. Let's begin with what is happening today. Ukrainian President Zelensky joins European leaders for the Ukraine summit at 10 Downing Street in London. Ahead of the crucial meeting, Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni says it is very, very important that West does not divide. Britain and France are working with Ukraine on plans to end the fighting with Russia, says UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer. Asserts that Europe has to find a way to work together for lasting peace after 3 years of bloody war. Amid US President Donald Trump's insistence that European leaders need to increase their defense budgets, defense officials who served with NATO warned the end of the military alliance could be just a few months away. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu warns Hamas that there will be no free lunches, says the ceasefire in Gaza will only continue if Hamas keeps releasing hostages. Tells cabinet meeting that Israel is fully coordinated with US President Donald Trump's administration. Death toll in the Chamoli avalanche in India's Uttarakhand's Mana region goes up to 8, with rescue officials pulling out 3 more bodies. Rescuers are looking for the last remaining person who is reported missing. Muslims across the world celebrate Ramzan. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi extends good wishes, says, may it bring peace and harmony.
Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us. You're watching Beyond World is One with me, Diksha Bisla. And before we unpack the biggest stories of this hour, let's quickly take a look at the headlines. Iran's Supreme Leader Khamenei says Trump-Zelensky blowout is proof that US cannot be trusted. Norwegian Defense Minister Tor Sandvik assures US Navy of support amid hauled-back bunkers' refusal to refuel American warships over Trump-Zelensky clash. Former NATO commander James Stavridis warns end of the alliance could be days away as US's commitment wavers. US confirms killing the leader of Al-Qaeda's Houris al-Din branch in precision strike on northwest Syria on 22nd of February. Israel says it's stopping entry of aid into Gaza over Hamas's refusal to extend phase 1 of ceasefire. A body has been recovered in Uttarakhand's Chamoli district as operations continue in the region to find 3 people who are still missing after Friday's avalanche. At least 37 people, including 4 minors, killed as 2 passenger buses collide on a highway in southern Bolivia.
Ahí está la cabeza más, ¿no?
Las flotas están...
Coal prices have plunged to 4-year lows, with Australian thermal coal hovering near $100 a ton due to mild weather and oversupply.
The fallout between US President Donald Trump and Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine has sparked global reactions not only among diplomatic circles but also among ordinary citizens. Pro-Ukraine protesters took to the streets in various cities, including Kiev and Washington, demanding unity against Russia. Take a look.
What happened yesterday was a scandal, that's all. But I believe that Mr. Zelensky is a great head of state. He stood up to those who treated him as if he were insignificant.
Воно хвилину мовчання за наші брати і сестри, які загинули за нас, за нашу свободу. Анектур, Маріуполь. Russie hors d'Ukraine. Russie terroriste. Russie hors d'Ukraine. Russie hors d'Ukraine. Russie terroriste.
Россия без Путина! Россия! Путина! Россия без Путина!
Стоит человек, называющий себя.
Ukraine deserves our support. We've let them down.
They humiliated not only him, they humiliated all the dead and all these children who lost their parents, all the widows.
Right. Thank you. For starters, thank you. Keep strong.
World leaders gathered in London Sunday for a summit to discuss the future of Ukraine's war with Russia. 3 years into the bloody conflict, leaders at a roundtable discussion told Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky he would have their continued support. The warm welcome in Europe stood in contrast to U.S. President Donald Trump's heated exchange with Zelensky in the Oval Office during his visit last week. Ukraine's president was there to sign a rare earth mineral deal with the U.S., but things took a turn in front of news cameras.
But you're either going to make a deal or we're out. And if we're out, you'll fight it out. I don't think it's going to be pretty, but you'll fight it out. But you don't have the cards. But once we sign that deal, you're in a much better position. But you're not acting at all thankful. And that's not a nice thing.
Trump's top diplomat repeated the president's position Sunday that Zelensky risks World War III by continuing to fight. Adding an end to this war comes through mediation and not on the battlefield.
I'm saying it's 0% likely if we don't get them to a negotiating table. And the sooner everyone grows up around here and figures out that this is a bad war that's heading in a bad direction with death and destruction and all kinds of dangers surrounding it that could spiral into a broader conflict, the sooner people grow up and realize that, I think the more progress we're going to be able to make.
Meanwhile, Ukrainian soldiers severely wounded and with amputated body parts returned to combat. They joined what Zelensky describes as 380,000 Ukrainians wounded in the war. Democrats in the United States Congress say this is the wrong time to abandon an ally.
The soldiers that I just saw last weekend from Ukraine who were getting medical help with hook arms, trying to stand up for the Ukrainian national anthem with one leg, this is not the time for us to undermine these brave Ukrainians.
And as the wounded population of Ukraine grows, so too do calls for peace talks.
We have to give peace a chance. We have to to create the circumstances in which enough pressure is brought on Putin, on Russia, to bring them, to coax them, to force them to the negotiating table. But if it goes wrong, we must be there on Ukraine's side.
For the Ukrainian soldiers, some badly injured still staffing the front lines, a peace deal may not come soon enough. Arash Arabasadi, VOA News.
And what you're doing is very disrespectful to the country, this country. That's back to you. Far more than a lot of people said they should have.
Have you said thank you once this entire meeting? No, in this entire meeting, have you said thank you?
Please. You think that if you will speak very loudly about the war, you can...
He's not speaking loudly. He's not speaking loudly.
Vladimir Putin launched a hypersonic missile to allegedly sink a foreign cargo ship that was said to be carrying British weapons to Ukraine. Russia is said to have unleashed an Iskander-M missile that hit a Panama flag container ship soon after it arrived in Odessa. Ukrainian sources suggest that 2 port workers were wounded in the strike, which also damaged the infrastructure of the port. However, no evidence as of now suggests that the ship was carrying British military weapons for Kyiv's use. Ukraine claims at least 20 foreign merchant ships have been damaged in the previous strikes by Russia. It comes as a dozen leaders from Europe and NATO have assembled in London today for Crunch Summit in a bid to salvage a peace deal for Ukraine. Sir Keir Starmer today said that Britain, France and Ukraine have agreed to work on a ceasefire plan and present it to Donald Trump. The PM also spoke with Donald Trump in an attempt to bridge the rift between the US and Europe after the historic White House showdown, which he found uncomfortable to watch. He said he is focused on being a bridge to restore peace talks, and he used the collapse of the talks as an opportunity to re-engage with Trump and Zelensky. Today's summit is likely to include talks on establishing a European military force to be sent to Ukraine and underpin a ceasefire deal.
The United Kingdom and Ukraine have signed a deal to provide £2.6 billion in loans towards Ukraine's defence. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky flew directly to London after his now infamous and explosive meeting with President Trump in the Oval Office yesterday. Sky News Washington correspondent Annalise Nielsen joins us live now. Annalise, what does all this mean for the minerals deal?
Well, it looks like the clear message from Zelensky is if the Americans don't want to support his country fighting this war against Russia in the way that he and the Ukrainian people want, he will find that support elsewhere. So to leave directly from the United States, to then fly directly to London, meet with Keir Starmer, who himself met with Donald Trump this week. And now we've just had this line about the £2.6 billion of loan support for Ukraine coming through. We're waiting for details about exactly what that means for the European support, but this is a clear signal that they think they can go it alone, and Zelensky was quite angry about having to sign off the rights to profits from these minerals in Ukraine to continue to enjoy US support. From the US side, this is exactly what they wanted. This was the very clear message from JD Vance when he spoke in Munich at the Security Summit, saying that Europe needed to do more to support Ukraine, given it was on their front doorstep and very far away from the United States. Wherever you stand on that kind of protectionist outlook in the world, what we are seeing is just a complete realignment here with the US priorities, in that they're being accused of stepping closer to Russia. From the US perspective, from everyone in the Trump administration who's spoken out since this meeting, they've said that they're not stepping closer to Russia, they're simply stepping back and taking themselves out of the equation and putting less money into Ukraine. And they're also calling on Europeans to be doing more to support their own energy interests, because that's been a key part of all this as well. But before I get too off the topic, what we are talking about here is an historic meeting again, with Zelensky meeting with Keir Starmer. He's set to meet with King Charles tomorrow, and he was much more conciliatory in meeting with the British today. He was greeted with a hug by Keir Starmer and that all-important thank you to open their meeting.
I want to thank you, people of the United Kingdom, such big support from the very beginning of this war. Thank you, your team. And I'm very happy that His Majesty the King accepted my meeting tomorrow, and I'm thankful that you organized such a great summit for tomorrow. And we are very happy in Ukraine that we have such strategic partners.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio has granted an interview yesterday after this fiery meeting in the Oval Office, and he's a really interesting perspective in all this. He has spoken positively about the support for Ukraine when he himself was running for president. He's been critical of Donald Trump in the past, but done a 180 on that to join the admin and support Trump's approach to foreign policy. He's seen as a very well-respected, well-read, well-understood member of the international community. He was supported through Congress without any opposition. He's seen as being a very reasonable player. He was furious around how this meeting went in the Oval Office, and he said the consideration from the Ukrainians has been poorly handled. He's essentially given the perspective saying that this deal was done. They wanted to come and have this ceremony to sign off on it. And if they weren't happy with it, they should have just not come and let the teams continue to negotiate, because at the end of the day, what they want is to bring everyone to the negotiating table to bring this conflict to an end.
This agreement that was supposed to be signed today was supposed to be an agreement that binds America economically to Ukraine, which to me, as I've explained, and I think the president alluded to today, is a security guarantee in its own way, because we're involved. It's now us, it's our interests. That was all explained. That was all understood. And nonetheless, for the last 10 days, in every engagement we've had with the Ukrainians, there's been complications in getting that point across, including the public statements that President Zelensky has made.
And then to the point I was making just a short time ago, what we have seen is just this frustration of why the Ukrainians wanted to come to the White House in the first place. What the New York Post is reporting is that retired General Kellogg, who is the envoy for the US in Russia and Ukraine, who's been charged with doing a lot of this negotiating to bring this conflict to an end. When he met with Zelensky, he was frustrated with pushback that he was getting from the Ukrainians, and the New York Post is reporting personally told Zelensky and his team to not go ahead with this meeting if they were coming with the same attitude that they had in private meetings, that he thought the two leaders weren't ready to have a meeting together and be on the same page, and that it would cause friction, which is exactly what we saw yesterday, and this is what we've heard again from the Secretary of State.
But they insisted on coming to D.C. This agreement could have been signed 5 days ago, but they insisted on coming to Washington, and there was should have been a very clear understanding. Don't come here and create a such scenario where you're going to start lecturing us about how diplomacy isn't going to work. President Zelensky took it in that direction, and it ended in a predictable outcome as a result. It's unfortunate. That wasn't supposed to be this way, but that's the path he chose. And I think, frankly, sends his country backwards in regards to achieving peace, which is what President Trump wants at the end of the day, is for this war to end.
So the question now is what happens next? It looks like between the US and Ukraine, not a lot. This could be something that now drags on for weeks, and the US may simply abandon its aspirations for these critical minerals in Ukraine. They may realize they're in a better negotiating position in a few weeks or months, or this may be something that the Russians want to offer them at some point to give access to if there is a deal done, because Ukraine still has a hell of a fight on its hands.
Egypt's top diplomat says his country's plan to rebuild Gaza following 16 months of war is practical and can be achieved without forcing people to leave. He was speaking after meeting with the Palestinian Prime Minister days ahead of an Arab summit in Cairo to announce the Egyptian plan. The Israeli military campaign in Gaza has left the enclave in ruins. The only guarantee to break the cycle of violence and assaults is for a political horizon to be present and give hope to the Palestinian people that their legitimate aspirations can be achieved in establishing an independent state on all of their national soil. Also, as His Excellency mentioned, the reconstruction plan is a practical one with specific short-term timeframes that are completely doable and achievable without the need to displace any citizens from their land.
وإحنا نريد أن ننطلق من هذه العملية كلها من أجل توحيد شقي.
We need to take off through this whole process in order to unite the two sides of the Palestinian nation in Gaza and the West Bank. So we will work on uniting the organizations, whether services, administrative or security, in order to form one state with one system, one law and also one weapon. We discussed all of these topics, and hopefully with the support of brothers in Egypt, these efforts will move forward, and we hope the Arab Summit will adopt the plan. The Egyptian plan comes after US President Donald Trump proposed removing the entire Palestinian population and redeveloping Gaza as a property project under
Iranian lawmakers voted to sack their finance minister, with Abdel Nasser Hemati losing a vote of confidence, with 182 of 273 parliamentarians voting against him. Iran's parliament sacked the finance minister after initiating impeachment proceedings over his handling of high inflation and a plummeting currency. During the proceedings, the country's president, Masoud Pezeshkian, defended Hemati and told the lawmakers that the country is in a full-scale war with the enemy and asked them to take a war formation.
We are in a full-scale war with the enemy. We must take a war formation. And in this situation, blaming each other will not solve the problem.
The impeachment comes amid Iran's worsening relations with the West. Ever since the U.S. withdrew from the 2015 nuclear deal, Iran's economy has been severely affected by international sanctions. In 2015, the Iranian rial was worth $32,000 to $1. But just 6 months into Pezeshkian's government, it had plummeted to $584,000 against $1. The nosedive of Iranian rial continues with exchange shops in Tehran trading 930,000 rials for every dollar.
ישראל מאמצת את המתווה של שליחו של הנשיא טראמפ, סטיב ויטקוף, להפסקת אש זמנית לתקופת הרמדאן והפסח. אנחנו מתואמים באופן מלא עם הנשיא טראמפ ואנשיו. לפי המידע שיש בישראל, חמאס מחזיק היום 59 חטופים, עד 24 חיים ולפחות 35 חללים. אנחנו לא מוותרים על אף אחד מהם, ואנחנו נחושים להחזיר את כולם הביתה. ישראל איננה נמצאת בהפרה, בעוד שהחמאס הפר פעם אחר פעם את ההסכם של שלב א'. על פי ההסכם המקורי, ישראל יכולה לחזור ללחימה לאחר היום ה-42, אם היא מתרשמת שהמשא ומתן לא אפקטיבי. הסעיף הזה נתמך במכתב צד של הממשל האמריקני הקודם, וקיבל גם את הגיבוי והתמיכה של ממשל טראמפ. אבל על אף זאת, הסכמנו למתווה ויטקוף, כי אנחנו מחויבים להשיב את חטופינו. בעוד שישראל הסכימה למתווה הזה, החמאס עד כה דבק בסירובו, הוא לא מסכים למתווה. אם חמאס ישנה את עמדתו, ישראל תיכנס מיד למשא ומתן ליישום המתווה. ואני רוצה להעביר דבר נוסף. לא יהיו ארוחות חינם. אם החמאס חושב שניתן יהיה להמשיך את הפסקת האש, או ליהנות מתנאי שלב א', מבלי שנקבל חטופים, הוא טועה בגדול. עם סיום שלב א', ולאור סירובו של החמאס למתווה ויטקוף, החלטנו בדיון אמש שהחל מהבוקר נמנע כל כניסה של סחורות והספקה לעזה. וצריך להדגיש כאן, החמאס משתלט בימים אלה על כל ההספקה והסחורות שנשלחות לרצועת עזה. הוא מתעלל באוכלוסייה העזתית שמנסה לקבל את הסיוע. הוא יורה בהם, והוא הופך את הסיוע ההומניטרי לתקציב טרור שמופנה נגדנו. לכך לא נסכים בשום אופן.
In other news, Taiwan has claimed to detect 45 Chinese aircraft near the island, a day after Taipei condemned China's live-fire drills off the south. And this is the highest number of Chinese aircraft detected near the island this year. A Defense Ministry statement said that 45 Chinese aircraft and 14 warships were spotted near Taiwan in a 24-hour period. It is the highest number of Chinese aircraft detected this year and most since December 11th last year. Meanwhile, U.S. President Donald Trump declined to comment whether the U.S. would ever allow China to take control of Taiwan by force. He was asked whether it was his policy that China would never take Taiwan by force while he is the president.
There are two people. Who do they work for? Where are they? China will never take Taiwan by force. I never comment on that. I don't comment on anything because I don't want to ever put myself in that position. And if I said it, I certainly wouldn't be saying it to you. I'd be saying it to other people, maybe people around this table, very specific people around this table. So I don't want to put myself in that position.
Trump was asked the question as China continued its show of force near Taiwan. On Wednesday, Taiwan had said that China staged a combat drill with aircraft and warships and announced live-fire exercises in an area about 40 nautical miles off the island's south. Taipei condemned the exercise as dangerous and a violation of international norms. Taiwan's military responded by sending forces to monitor, alert, and respond appropriately. The ministry also urged the international community to continue to pay attention to the security of the Taiwan Strait and the region. The Chinese drills came a day after Taiwan seized a Chinese crude cargo ship suspected of severing a subsea telecom cable serving Taiwan's Penghu Island group. China claims democratic Taiwan as a part of its own territory and has threatened to use force to bring the island under its own control. Beijing has increased the deployment of fighter jets and naval vessels around Taiwan in recent years to press its claim of sovereignty, which Taipei has rejected. And for more on this, TVBS reporter Vivan Hissao has sent us this report from Taipei.
Tensions remain high in Taiwan on Thursday, with the Defense Ministry reporting 45 sorties of PLA aircraft, along with 14 PLA Navy vessels and one official ship operating around the main island in the past 24 hours. Earlier today, Taiwan's Ministry of Foreign Affairs also condemned China's unexpected designation of a live fire training zone just off our southern shores. In a press statement, they've called it a blatant violation of international norms and a direct threat to regional security. The ministry has urged China to exercise restraint and cease all military provocations immediately. Behind me, you can see a street in Taipei bustling with office workers heading to their jobs, a clear sign that daily life continues as usual, despite the escalating tensions. Taiwan's Ministry of National Defense reported that Chinese military vessels left the designated zone at 3:40 p.m. on Wednesday. They also released footage showing Taiwanese naval ships monitoring large Chinese amphibious vessels in the area. A Taiwanese naval ship even warned the Chinese Huanggang frigate against conducting maritime shooting in Taiwan's exclusive economic zone. A spokesperson for Taiwan's presidential office assured the public that the government has the situation under control. President Lai Ching-te has directed all relevant agencies to remain vigilant and closely monitor the situation. Meanwhile, Taiwan's Maritime Port Bureau has been issuing hourly advisories to ships, urging them to avoid the live fire training zone. China's actions have also drawn criticism from Australia, where lawmakers slammed Beijing's lack of transparency in notifying live fire exercises. China's Ministry of Defense has defended its actions, claiming the drills comply with international law and do not affect aviation safety. But as tensions rise, Taiwan's government and international observers remain watchful, urging China to adhere to international norms.
A child has become the second person in Uganda to die of Ebola. The World Health Organization says the 4-year-old passed away at Mulago Hospital in the capital, Kampala, the only facility for dealing with cases of the virus. On Tuesday, Ugandan officials confirmed that the country had recorded 10 infections with the Sudan strain of Ebola. The child's death is seen as a setback for health officials who'd previously said the outbreak of the highly infectious hemorrhagic virus had been contained after 8 people known to be infected had recovered following treatment. The first victim was a male nurse who died the day before the outbreak was declared on the 30th of January. Symptoms of the often fatal disease include fever, headaches, muscle pains, and bleeding. The virus is transmitted through contact with infected bodily fluids and tissue. Contact tracing is key to stemming the spread of Ebola, and there are no approved vaccines for the Sudan strain. However, a vaccination trial was launched in Uganda earlier this month. More than 15,000 people have died of Ebola in Africa in the past 50 years.
The message is probably just that, try to be American first. And so I know there's a lot of illegal immigrants coming in, don't speak the language at all, and he wants it out there to be the culture, and people should, kind of assimilate and want to be Americans.
I think it's ridiculous. I don't think it's what we should be worrying about right now. We should be focused on the fact that we're spending $10 for a dozen eggs, and he said he was going to bring those prices down. And also, what about human rights issues? That's more important than declaring something the national language.
Technically, America itself was a melting pot of different languages and cultures within itself. So we have different experiences and different cultures intertwining and just exchanging languages and teaching other people in the community as itself. So it being a primary language doesn't make sense to be announced when we have such a diverse community.
Yo, I'm going down! Oh!
Ha ocurrido un accidente fatal y nos ha dejado alrededor de 33 personas fallecidas confirmadas ya.
Existen varios fallecidos, pero queremos salvar vidas haciendo parar este bus. Necesitamos en este momento una grúa, una pala también para poder hacer parar este bus que está obstruyendo acá y que está aplastando a la gente.
Producto de este fatal accidente tenemos 39 personas heridas en 4 hospitales de la localidad de Uyuni y 37 personas que han perdido la vida. El personal está realizando el trabajo para identificar y ya tener los nombres de las personas que están internadas heridas y de las personas que han perdido la vida en este lamentable accidente.
Meta is receiving support from a social media platform competitor, Reddit, over its decision to end its fact-checking program on Facebook and Instagram. Meta announced the change in January, just days before President Trump's inauguration. Instead of using third-party, outside fact-checkers, the platform now relies on a community notes system where users can add context to other users' posts. Reddit co-founder Alexis Ohanian calls the decision decision pragmatic and says Meta's original fact-checking effort was simply untenable. Speaking at the Web Summit in Qatar, he told CNBC News that fact-checking on a global scale and in real time was never going to work.
We always want to under-promise, over-deliver. It was setting expectations that were impossible to meet. And so this area of gray to basically say, look, we're going to leave it up to the community to do a kind of community voting. And I think Twitter implemented it quite well, and it makes sense they're copying it.
Meta's move to end its fact-checking program started here in the U.S. this year. But Meta has plans to eventually implement the community notes design in other countries as well. Meta's Chief Global Affairs Officer, Joel Kaplan, said in a press release, Meta's platforms are built to be places where people can express themselves freely. That can be messy. On platforms where billions of people can have a voice, all the good, bad, and ugly is on display. But that's free expression. When we launched our independent fact-checking program in 2016, we were very clear that we didn't want to be the arbiters of truth. That's not the way things played out, especially in the United States. In its end to fact-checking announcement, Meta credited X for its implementation of community notes and called it a more effective approach in maintaining free speech. Not everyone has been on board with the changes, some suggesting it could allow for an increase of what they call misinformation on Meta platforms. A fellow at the Brookings Institution said at the time of the fact-check system dismantling, this type of wisdom of the crowd approach can be really valuable, but doing so without proper testing and viewing its viability around scale is really, really irresponsible. Meta's already having a hard time dealing with bad content as it is, and it's going to get even worse.
Members of Congress are introducing a resolution to nullify a new regulation for digital consumer payment applications like Venmo and PayPal. The rule was created by the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau during the final weeks of the Biden administration and requires the payment companies to follow similar rules as banks. Senator Pete Ricketts and Congressman Mike Flood are bringing forward a Congressional Review Act resolution which allows Congress to override agency rules with the approval of the president.
With regard to the CFPB, we're looking to stop their unnecessary expansion and really trying to start getting into areas where they're really not supposed to, non-financial payment systems, which they really don't even define properly.
In creating the rule, the CFPB expanded its own authority under the Consumer Financial Protection Act. Unless the rule is overturned, the payment companies will now be held to the same standard as banks and credit unions in regards to privacy, surveillance, transaction disputes, fraud, and account freezes or closures, known as debanking. Former CFPB Director Rohit Chopra said in November, "Digital payments have gone from novelty to necessity, and our oversight must reflect this reality. The rule will help to protect consumer privacy, guard against fraud, and prevent illegal account closures." The rule applies to companies that handle more than 50 million transactions per year. The CFPB estimated the most popular apps covered by the rule collectively process 13 billion payments annually. Ricketts pointed out that payment companies are already regulated at the federal and state level, making this rule duplicative. He also said the CFPB significantly underestimated the costs companies would incur during any audits.
Said it only cost $25,000 for an audit from CFPB, and I can tell you right now that that's probably not even enough to cover the lawyer's fees for the first day of work when you get an audit by somebody like the CFPB.
The rule has already taken effect. It's one of multiple Biden-era regulations congressional Republicans are trying to overturn.
BlackRock is making a major shift away from its diversity, equity, and inclusion policies, something the company had heavily promoted in recent years. In a company-wide email sent Friday, CEO Larry Fink and other top executives announced the changes to better align with orders under the Trump administration. Fink wrote, "There has been significant changes to the U.S. legal and policy environment related to DEI that apply to many companies, including BlackRock. In light of this, we are conducting an ongoing review of our global practices and announcing several changes today." Fink added, "Delivering for clients requires attracting the best people from across the world. We are committed to creating a culture that welcomes diverse people and perspectives to foster creative solutions and avoid groupthink." The asset management giant says it will no longer renew workforce representation goals or require managers to interview diverse roster of candidates. Instead, it's merging its talent management and DEI teams into a new global talent and culture team. BlackRock has also removed DEI strategies and policies from its annual report. While BlackRock is the latest of dozens of large companies to scale back DEI initiatives, the move from BlackRock has significance given the CEO's prior promotion of DEI as a company necessity. In a 2021 letter to shareholders, Fink wrote, "Just as we ask of other companies, we have a long-term strategy aimed at improving diversity, equity, and inclusion at BlackRock. To truly drive change, we must embed DEI into everything we do." BlackRock joins dozens of companies like McDonald's, Ford, and Walmart in scaling back initiatives. This week alone, Warner Brothers Discovery dropped DEI, Goldman Sachs, Paramount, and Bank of America all rolled back DEI language and policies. Political pressure continues to mount for corporations. Last month, President Donald Trump signed an executive order calling for federal investigations into corporate DEI programs on the grounds of potential civil rights violations.